Welcome back to the deep dive. So you've handed us a pretty substantial file this time, and it's all focused on, well, the most critical and final stage of any mortgage transaction, the closing process.
It is. And for anyone preparing for the NMLS SAFE Exam, this is exactly where you need to stop thinking like a salesperson and really start thinking like a regulator.
Or a regulator, okay.
Yes, because closing is that single moment where compliance is tested most rigorously and where a mistake can go from being a simple procedural error to, a high-stakes violation almost instantly.
That's our mission today, then. We're not talking about the celebration. We're not talking about handing over the keys.
Not at all.
We are diving deep into the legal and regulatory architecture of closing. We're focusing on the culmination of the entire loan process, the moment of consummation, where the risk to the consumer and the risk to the lender are, I guess, at their absolute peak.
And you have to internalize that perspective to succeed on the exam. Regulators see closing as the point of maximum consumer exposure. Why? Because this is the borrower's last chance to really understand, to ask questions, and to back out if they need to. Every rule we're about to discuss is built around protecting the borrower right there at the closing table.
That focus on consumer protection, that must drive all the compliance checks we're about to cover. And on that note, if you are enjoying these NMLS Safe Study deep dives, please do take a moment to subscribe, like, and comment. Let us know what topic you want us to cover next, or maybe tell us which state you're tuned in from. It really supports and helps grow the channel, and it allows us to reach more learners just like you.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the biggest hurdle to clear before anyone even schedules a closing appointment: the clear to close mandate. What does that status signify beyond just, good news? Well, it's a compliance prerequisite, not just some celebratory stamp. The phrase clear to close means the loan is definitively ready for consummation because all the work from the application all the way through underwriting is finished and fully compliant.
I get that it means the file is finished, but what are the actual regulatory components that make up a clear to close?
It means that every single underwriting condition has been satisfied and verified.
Every single one.
Every one. Think appraisal reviews, income verifications, title clearance, getting the hazard insurance in place, all of it. The file has to be fully compliant with all applicable federal laws, state regulations, and of course the lender's own underwriting guidelines. It's an unambiguous statement of readiness under the law.
Okay, and this is a huge exam strategy nugget based on what I'm reading. If an exam scenario suggests closing can proceed while any underwriting condition, even a tiny one, like a clarification on a pay stub, is still outstanding,
then that loan is not eligible to close. Full stop.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The exam is testing your discipline against a feeling of urgency. The borrower's excitement, the rate lock that's about to expire, none of it matters. If the conditions haven't been met, you pause. The consequences of not pausing can be severe. We're talking loan suspension, loss of the rate lock, and even potential regulatory penalties for, insufficient due diligence.
And once you've hit that status, you pivot immediately to this intense pre-closing coordination. We're talking about the lender, the closing agent, sometimes called the settlement agent, the title company, and the borrower all moving in lockstep. This is where the paper trail has to be perfect.
Correct. And that paper trail brings us to the next massive compliance hurdle: timely and accurate disclosures. Closing simply cannot proceed unless those timing rules, particularly around the final disclosures, have been rigorously met.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the star of this whole compliance show and the most heavily tested document has to be the closing disclosure, the CD. This thing is the final scorecard, right? It replaced the old HUD-1.
That's right. The CD is required to reflect the final accurate loan terms, costs, and transaction details. The main compliance rule here is centered on the fact that the borrower must receive that CD at least 3 business days before the date of consummation.
Okay, hold on. Let's quickly clarify that. You keep using the term consummation. Is that the same thing as closing or signing?
That's a crucial distinction for the exam.
Yeah.
Consummation is the specific, legally defined moment when the borrower becomes contractually obligated on the loan. So while signing the documents, the closing usually leads right to consummation. They're not always the exact same moment. The 3-day clock is tied to consummation.
Perfect clarity. Now, the exam just loves the curveball scenario. Material changes. You've issued the CD, everyone is in that 3-day waiting period, and boom, something changes. What actually counts as a material change that forces you to stop and restart that clock?
The rule is actually very precise on this. It's generally 3 things. First, the annual percentage rate, the APR, changes above a certain tolerance. That's typically 1/8% for fixed-rate loans.
Yeah.
Second, the addition of a prepayment penalty. And third, a change in the loan product itself, like from a fixed rate to an ARM. If any of those things happen after the CD is issued, you must issue a revised CD, and that required 3-day waiting period must restart.
So that's the key discipline the exam is testing. They'll disguise these things. A small last-minute fee adjustment, for example. If it's not one of those 3 material changes, you can often proceed. But if it crosses that line, you have to hit the brakes and reset the clock.
And that discipline is what protects the borrower from being, forced into a loan that fundamentally changed right at the finish line. The exam will always reward the compliant action, which is pausing over the pressure to close.
And that leads us straight to the core issue of accuracy and informed consent. If we've made it to the closing table, the documents have to be non-negotiably accurate. An error at this stage it's catastrophic.
It is, exactly. Errors that might have been manageable earlier in the process, like an incorrect estimate, they become immediate compliance failures at closing. An incorrect interest rate or loan amount or final payment figure isn't just a paperwork fix. It's a visible, costly, and actionable violation.
So if a discrepancy is discovered at the closing table, say the borrower spots a fee they weren't expecting or the payment seems a little off, what is the MLO's mandatory correct response?
The key action point, and this is stressed everywhere in the source material, is this. The correct response is always to delay the closing until the issue is corrected. And, if necessary, properly redisclosed with the right waiting period.
So no scratching out numbers.
No scratching out numbers, no promising to fix it later. Delay is a mandated response.
I appreciate that emphasis on discipline, but let's shift focus from just the paperwork to the borrower's experience, what you called informed consent. How does a regulator define that in the context of the closing table?
Informed consent means the borrower has been given enough time and, more importantly, the opportunity to review, ask questions, and fully understand every single obligation they're about to undertake. Closing isn't just about signing papers, it's about comprehension.
So any exam question that suggests a borrower is being rushed or pressured or discouraged from reading that giant stack of documents is basically just a test of ethical conduct.
Precisely. The right answer has to prioritize the borrower's ability to understand over the need to meet a deadline or a quota. And that brings us right to the complexity of responsibility. Because the MLO is often there, their role is misunderstood, and so it's tested frequently.
Okay, so let's unpack the MLO's limits first. What don't they do? The MLO does not conduct the closing, they're not there to give legal advice, and they definitely don't have the authority to alter documents at the table.
Correct. Their primary responsibility is to make sure the transaction stays within the guardrails they helped establish. They're there to ensure the borrower understands the final terms and that the transaction aligns perfectly with what was disclosed and approved. They're like the final compliance gatekeeper.
What if an MLO becomes aware of an error at closing? Even if they didn't cause it, maybe the title company miscalculated a tax proration. They can't just ignore it.
No, ignoring it is not an option. And that's the crucial nugget for the exam. Awareness triggers mandatory responsibility. The second the MLO sees that error, they are ethically and legally obligated to halt the process until it's fixed. They can't plead ignorance after they've been put on notice.
Okay, now let's talk about the person who's actually running the show at the table. The settlement agent. They're handling the money, making sure documents get signed, and recording the transaction.
That's their operational role, yes.
Yeah.
But here's the complication the exam loves to test. The compliance principle of non-delegation. If the lender or MLO delegates the execution of the closing to a settlement agent, that delegation does not remove the lender's core responsibility to ensure accuracy and compliance.
Wait a minute. So if the settlement agent is a licensed professional and they make some administrative mistake, why is the MLO or the lender on the hook for their error? Isn't that the point of delegating?
You're asking the exact right question, which is why the rule exists. The SAFE exam reinforces that responsibility follows authority, not convenience. The lender is the one who chose and relied on that settlement agent. If that agent makes an error that causes a regulatory violation, let's say an improper fee disclosure or a delayed recording, the lender, and by extension the MLO, may still face consequences. The lender is ultimately responsible for the outcome of the loan they originated. You can't delegate away your compliance obligation just by hiring a third party.
That makes the MLO's job terrifyingly clear. They have to be vigilant right up until that last signature. And speaking of vigilance, what about those final verification steps and red flags right before that ultimate signing?
Right. Even after getting the clear to close, there are still required checks. The lender will do a final verification of employment, a VOE, and often an updated soft credit pull. This is just to make sure the borrower's financial situation hasn't materially changed since they were first approved.
Which is another classic test scenario. What if the borrower, they get excited about the new house and they go buy a new car or change jobs the week before closing?
That is a critical red flag. And the correct response, again, is reassessment. You can't just proceed as planned.
Why not?
Because taking on new debt or changing your income source threatens a violation of the ability to repay rule, or ATR. The ATR rule mandates that the lender has to verify the borrower can actually afford the loan. If the borrower's debt-to-income ratio has fundamentally changed because of a new car loan, the lender must pause and re-verify that the borrower still qualifies. Proceeding without that verification is a potential ATR violation.
That's the regulatory logic, clear as day. Now, let's quickly clarify that distinction we touched on earlier. Closing versus funding, people confuse them all the time.
They do. So closing is the signing of the documents. That's the moment of consummation when the legal obligation kicks in. Funding is the actual disbursement of the money. If the funding conditions haven't been met, just signing the papers doesn't complete the transaction. In a typical purchase, funding happens pretty soon after signing, but it might require confirmation that the deed has been recorded or something similar.
And this brings us to rescission rights, which puts a mandatory delay between signing and funding.
Precisely. For certain transactions, specifically owner-occupied refinances, so loans secured by a consumer's principal dwelling borrowers, have a non-waivable right of rescission after closing.
The cooling off period.
Exactly. It's generally a 3-business-day cooling-off period where they can legally cancel the transaction for any reason at all.
And the critical restriction related to funding in that scenario is?
The funds may not be dispersed during that rescission period. So if an exam presents a refinance scenario where the MLO suggests immediate funding, that signals a clear and immediate compliance violation of TILA of the Truth in Lending Act. You have to wait.
Okay. We've built a really robust understanding of the discipline required here. Let's try to synthesize this for the listener's main goal, passing that exam.
Yeah, we have to go back to the regulatory mindset. Closing is the point of maximum scrutiny because it's the point of maximum consumer exposure.
Yeah.
The exam isn't just asking if you know the rules, it's asking if you'll follow them under pressure. It's designed to reward those who treat closing like a controlled, high-stakes legal event, not just a formality.
So what does this all mean for cutting through the noise in an exam scenario? We need a mental framework.
Use the 4 questions from the source material. For any closing scenario they throw at you, just stop, take a breath, and ask. 1, are all underwriting conditions cleared? 2, are the disclosures accurate and timely, especially the CD? 3, is the borrower's consent truly informed? And finally, 4, has anything materially changed since the approval?
And if the answer to any of those is no, the correct compliant response is always the same. Stop, delay, correct the error, and redisclose if you have to.
That is the core discipline. And the final ethical conclusion here is that external pressures, whether it's the lure of a commission, the push to hit end-of-month targets, or even just borrower convenience, none of that ever justifies bypassing a legal requirement. Maintaining the compliance integrity is paramount.
This has been a critical deep dive. Closing is really the ultimate convergence of professionalism, compliance, and ethics. And errors at this stage aren't just problematic, they're visible, they're costly, and they are ultimately entirely preventable if you just follow the procedures we've outlined.
It's so true. Understanding closing is crucial because it all connects back to the integrated system of the mortgage process. Each stage builds on the last one, and the finality of closing holds everyone accountable for all the steps that came before it.
And once more, as you continue your studies, if you are enjoying these NMLS SAFE Study deep dives, please subscribe, like, and comment. Tell us which topic you want us to cover next, or tell us which state you're tuned in from. It really does support and help grow the channel and lets us reach more learners.
And maybe it's leave you with a thought for further reflection. We established that an MLO's awareness of an error at closing triggers a mandatory responsibility to pause. So how does the discovery of an error made by the settlement agent 24 hours after closing change the MLO's mandatory corrective action, given that the document's already been signed, the loan has technically been consummated, and maybe the transaction has even been recorded?
A great question to ponder the continued responsibility in that complex post-closing phase. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.